Hello! It is Halloween and I am painting at a graveyard. A local Alla Prima painting group decided to all get together and paint here at the graveyard. This is an old graveyard and it's actually the oldest arboretum in Portland, so they have lots and lots of different kind of trees here. I started out by sketching with a watercolor pencil, lining up my design. I really wanted to capture the headstones. There's a lot of really cool old headstones in this graveyard. So I found a really neat little area that had a bunch of them with a bunch of the really big trees intermixed. So that's what I decided to do. And I spent quite a bit of time drawing it out, since there's a lot of different shapes and perspective on the headstones. I really wanted to make sure to get those in properly in my drawing so that when I go to paint it, it's not as much of a trouble. You'll have to excuse my sniffles. I'm one of those people that just gets really cold as soon as the temperature goes a little bit down and there's moisture in the air. This day was on the verge of raining almost all day. I did wear a lot of layers to try to keep myself warm. This cemetery is right across the street from a school, so apparently they use the cemetery for gym class on occasion, because we had a class come over and start running laps. The thing that really attracted me to this scene was these tall towers that were on top of some of these headstones, and how when you look through them it sort of looks like a miniature city with all the big concrete towers. So I really kind of squished them together a little bit more to emphasize that full clustered city looking feeling. The real trick to getting the tombstones looking correct is perspective. And these tombstones are facing the corner of them towards me, so I'm going to have a 2-point perspective where I'll draw the lines out towards the edge of the page, heading towards the horizon. Now I'm putting in what's going to be the main tower among these tombstones. This one I paid special attention to. It had these 2 other little headstones on the side of it, so it was definitely someone special. I'm not sure what type of tree this is, but it was a really cool graveyard tree because it was definitely old and twisted. It looked like it had had some branches broken off, and just the way that the bark and the body of it was bulging and twisted was really cool, and I had to try to capture that. Since this was such a busy scene, I really wanted to start with a value wash to really remind myself what's going on and where things are, especially in the background, because as it goes further into the background, there really was a lot more information there than I wanted to deal with. So I was kind of just creating a value study to push the far background to the back by making it a little bit blue, and then as the trees and branches come forward, adding a little bit more slight warms into them and greens. This tree being a redwood tree, I used a mixture of warmer browns, so a little bit of my cadmium red and some of my yellow ochre along with the burnt umber. I started out working very quickly to try to get the white of the page covered with some basic colors, and then I would go back and refine those colors after I got most of the base and the backgrounds, the foreground covered. Then I can go back and create texture and other highlights. I also did the same thing for the grass that's just beyond this foreground hill. I just did a basic wash to get a little bit of green in there so I can start to piece together what's going on in the painting, that there's grass back there, and that kind of falls back into the distance a little bit more. So the many trees in this graveyard really threw me for a loop, because as I started putting them in, I realized that it was overlapping layers of many different trees, and there wasn't a ton of color variation. There were some autumn colored ones a little bit past these foreground ones, and so I really had to try to figure out how to create that depth and that layers of trees while keeping the bright autumn colored leaves pushed in the background. So I decided to go with a very limited color palette and stay kind of just towards the brown, green, and not a ton of yellow, because I knew if I put a lot of yellow and orange into those, they might start to pop forward. So trying to really mute them down and keep them behind everything. I ended up getting way too cold at the cemetery. My hands and feet started to go a little bit numb, so I decided to just take it home and finish it at home. As you can see, I really only had a few headstones left. I had done most of the trees already, at least with a beginning layer. I am going to go back and do more work on the trees, but I figured filling in the tombstones wouldn't be too difficult at home. I went right home and ate lunch and then continued to work on it, so I still kind of had the image in my mind while I was working on it, so I didn't even have to refer to a photo. I could still kind of remember the difference in shades from the headstones. I could also refer to the colors that I already had there. Since they were all concrete and maybe just different ages of concrete, or some had moss and stuff on them, I could basically use the colors that I already had on the picture to recreate some of the other colors of the other stones. Now that I was home and my hands weren't shaking, I could focus on filling in some of the cracks and making sure that there wasn't those little white borders around the headstones, and can just continue to fill things in, fixing some of the values. I wanted that tree to be a little bit darker, and really just refining. You know, once I get at home and in the studio, I end up spending way too much time working on things, but luckily I was able to get this one done in a reasonable amount of time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends.